Welcome to another edition of the Sportswire Spotlight. I'm Will Kaderli. Joining me, as always, is Dylan Garner, my partner in crime. And this week we are at Highland Springs High School, and we are, for the second time in a row, talking track, and a good reason why. To my far left, pole vault extraordinaire Kendric Curry, only a junior. He's got a long way to go, and he's already lifted himself to new heights. And head coach of the Highland Springs track and field team, Larry Williams. Guys, thanks for being part of the Sportswire Spotlight.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Thank you for having us.
You got it. Hey, Kendric, I just want to say right off the bat, I mean, it's one thing when you see the numbers on MileStat. It's one thing when you see the stats. But then you meet the person in person. And Dylan and I were just I was getting highlights and just wanted to check out track. Because that's his thing when he was at the Times Dispatch. Was his main deal.
Hadn't been
track.
in a while, so
right, yeah. So we had some athletes we wanted to see. You guys are Region 6A. Yeah. Right, but this is the Region 5C meet at Hermitage, and you're just hanging out, watching other people do pole vault, coaching. Tell me about that. What were you doing there? It was kind of cool to meet you.
Yeah, so at my club where I practice at Extreme Heights, we have a bunch of people that go to different schools. So I was coaching people from, Tucker. There were some from like Midlothian. And they were all in 5C, and there were also some boys there as well jumping. So I was coaching. Probably from about 9:30, 10 o'clock when they started. I was coaching a bunch of people. So,
what do you tell them that they don't already know? I mean, pole vault, we were talking about this earlier before we started. It's got to be the most nuanced, niche kind of sport. So what do you tell them?
It can be very nuanced. It's very technical for sure. But I just mainly give them guidance. They already they're very good jumpers on their own. They just need some guidance sometimes. So that definitely helps a lot. Also, giving them some positivity when they're going as well is a big factor as well.
And I believe you won your region title. I don't know if it was the same day, but the same weekend. I don't know which day you
Thursday.
Actually got the jump. Yeah. So, great weekend for you guys for sure. Getting able, and I know I think is it Anna from J.R. Tucker ended up winning the girls pole vault. Yeah. So I know y'all at Extreme Heights had a pretty good weekend, like you normally do. But you know what I mean.
16 feet.
Yes, that was the jump.
And that's not even your PR. 16 feet, 4 inches earlier for indoor national. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. It was definitely a good meet. This was really only the second time I've jumped 16 at the time. And so when I was jumping, I've definitely felt good. I got over 15.6. I think it was my first or second attempt, so I haven't done that until about then. Then they got to 16. They had to stop it because they were doing some announcements over there or something. I got to be on the live screen, which was interesting to say the least. And then they got back, so I got over that on my second attempt versus the first time I got over on my third. So I was already I was feeling pretty good. So by the time we got to 16.4, I did one attempt on a small pole. Well, small in quotation marks.
Yeah.
And so he told me to go up. I've never used that pole. I was a little skeptical, so I waited for the gun to go off. And they raised the yellow flag, so when the yellow flag goes up, you only have 15 seconds to initiate a jump.
Oh, wow.
So
that's like the caution. It's like your caution flag right there.
Yeah. So
with a pole that you don't normally use.
So I just went for it and just so.
I mean, so when I ran track, to date myself, when I was your age, back in the 1990s,
back when.
Yeah, our pole vaulter he was a crazy dude. And so every time, I see people that are willing to thrust themselves up by a pole 16 feet in the air or higher, I think it takes a special crazy person to want to do that. Yeah. How did you get into the sport of pole vault?
So my sister actually did gymnastics at the place that I have pole vault at. So even though I didn't do gymnastics there, the coach actually came up to me on a few different occasions and asked if I wanted to. And eventually I was allowed to say yeah. So I did and tried. And first meet, probably 6 weeks later, 6 feet. So I had a good time jumping. So I just came back and just kept going.
That's awesome. And Coach, I know we'll get into more about the team dynamics and things like that. But from your perspective, you're a longtime track athlete, football player, is that right? And so from your perspective, if you look back on your history, were you familiar with some pole vaulters back in the day when you were running? And what was your perspective as maybe someone that didn't get to do it as much? Like, what was their kind of, what was your perspective on what they were able to provide for the team or the people in the county or region that you were playing in?
So back then, even at the old Highland Springs, we didn't even have a track.
Right.
So it was just gravel.
Yeah.
So when we go to any track meeting, we see pole vaulters. We was like, what are they doing? Like, why is the pole going to break? Do they do any other events?
Yeah.
And just like you said, I just think it takes a different type of person to want to run full speed with a pole that is taller than them.
Yeah.
Stick it in the ground, bend it, and then get over 16 feet and land softly on the mat. Me personally, no.
I'd probably land on concrete.
I was about to say,
Did they still have the javelin back then?
I have no idea. I don't remember seeing. I think at the AAU meets they have javelin and stuff.
We have the javelin, and for some reason they thought that was unsafe, so they got rid of that.
I can't imagine
I don't know why.
Any thrill that's going to be high and I'm going to drop down, I'm saving that for Kings Dominion. Yeah.
Coach Williams, one thing that you know, it's athletes. As a football player yourself, as a track coach now, and you're people don't know, but I mean, you had a semi-pro career, almost complete pro career. Kansas City Chiefs. You were going to join Mike Tomlin in the Steelers. Had an injury. That wasn't in the cards. You've seen athletes. So what do you see when you see Kendric?
I see a kid with multiple dynamics. And I know we'll get into it a little bit later, but this kid likes to take flight in a lot of different ways. Yeah. His mindset, along with his academics, go hand in hand. So for him to be athletic as he is, because a lot of people know he's pretty fast too, and you will get to see that next year. But for him to have the confidence to run down there again to get over 6 feet, as well as take flight, with the airplane situation, yeah, he's an amazing kid. Even as an assistant, I always used to talk to Coach Folsom, like, who is this kid? I don't see him around much, but I just know he's first place in everything, and he's wearing black and gold. Who is this guy?
He's going to get you 10 points.
Guaranteed.
I find that is fascinating since you brought up the flying. I do want to bring that up. I mean, what high school – I'm sorry, man. I've never met a high school kid who became a pilot while he was in high school.
Never.
Tell me that story. What happened with that?
Well, what was it? Probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I got a Christmas gift going for a discovery flight. So you get to fly, and there's the CFI or the certified flight instructor sitting right next to you. So you get to take control over it while they still have some control, and you get to fly around, and they're telling you what to do. And
what kind of
really
plane
fun.
is this, by the way?
So it was a Cessna 172. It's not like the huge 737 jumbo jet. It's something small, something probably fit here in the neighboring room. So
We're not seeing you take off from Richmond International Airport in in one of those big jets.
No.
Spirit
Not for
Airlines.
Delta or anything like
Not
that.
for Delta.
Yeah.
Not yet. He's not there yet.
Maybe one of those Ryanair landings.
So how did you propel yourself from there? I mean, what is the depth of your avian knowledge, I guess?
I'm working on enhancing it further because you got to do all this training for it. It's a lot of training. Like, it's rigorous for sure. I know to get the license that I'm working on to start, you have to take 3 different tests just to get the license. So.
Is it just a coincidence that you're like, I mean, I'm sure you have more things going on, hobbies and whatnot, but your like primary 2 things that you're known for are lifting yourself into the air and flying through the air with a pole vault, and then literally flying through the air. Is that just coincidental for you, or is that just, like it just feels right?
I've always looked upwards to things that I want to do, so just looking up is kind of fun. So.
I'm just trying to picture this from a father's perspective. Like if my kid says to me, hey, I got pole vault practice, I got to compete in nationals and indoor, and then after that I'll be flying. Just, that's kind of a weird schedule for me. It's pretty impressive.
Can you describe, so I want to ask kind of for both of those, what it was like maybe when you started to get really good at pole vault, right? And when you were getting 10, 11, 12, when you were starting to get really high into the air, what it was like, or what it is like now at 16 feet, what it is like to get that high up. What is that jump like? What is that feeling? And like, what are you experiencing in that moment? And then the same thing with actually flying an aircraft, I'm curious about as well.
Yeah, so believe it or not, they're actually kind of similar. Yeah. Like the biggest thing is just keeping your mind kind of clear. Like for example, this past, Thursday I think it was, that I was jumping. When I went to my 16 feet attempt, the first attempt didn't go necessarily as I wanted it to. So my second attempt, I kind of cleared it, and I took the pole. Well, I'll just say it was a 15 feet 7 inch 165, so it holds 165 pounds comfortably. And I'm just running down the runway with that, and I get over its second attempt, and I was very, very excited about that. So I kind of been incorporate that in flying, just working to get the plane off the ground and just being exciting with the environment, just having fun with it.
Yeah.
Hey, Coach, when I see people practice, 4x1, you practice the handoff. You practice getting out of the blocks correctly, that first 100 meters if it's a 4x4. But with pole vault, I'm wondering how you practice. For people at home, like for you, Kendrick, what do you have to do to be in shape to lift yourself up 16 feet in the air? I'm assuming it's a ton of core work.
It can be. It's really just a lot. It comes a lot from the glutes as well, because you have to kind of use those to swing as well. You also have to use a bunch of speed. Pole vault's just primarily speed. In the words of Sean Francis, speed is like the gunpowder for your jump. You can't really go anywhere without it.
How do you remain, because you have an interesting relationship, because a lot of the people that you train with are the best in the best. You're ranked 56 nationally.
And
You're ranked
second
in
or
the
third in the
top,
state, yeah.
top 3, top 4 in the state, and you're competing against people who want those same marks, and including the guy at St. Chris, Victor Olson, who's just like broke the state record. How are you able to be friends with some of these people while you're training, yet at the same time when it's go time say, yeah, but I'm not your friend today. Today I'm beating you.
And usually, well, I know when you mentioned Victor, we're actually teammates. We all go to the same club. So whenever we have meets together, we're kind of all supporting each other. We're all very excited for each other. And so when someone does something good, it's all kind of, yay, we get to celebrate everything.
Yeah.
So
it's really just about boosting each other up as high as you can possibly go. And that probably, I was curious how that competitive aspect worked. Obviously, you want to, I think everyone wants to have a higher number to the person to their left in some form, but if you're all going up, there's probably a mutual group satisfaction.
Sounds like a brotherhood
I was about to say,
anything.
you experience that on a football field. If a sprinter is going to feel the same thing if they're both running 51 seconds and their guy to the left runs 50 flat.
I think it's a mutual understanding, because the bright lights really you don't shine under bright lights. It really showcases what you do in the dark. So a lot of times, if we put in the hard work throughout the week, and then I have an opponent run something similar as me, then I know he went through something as similar as me. So it's a mutual respect. So I might want to win for a personal thing, but it's definitely great to see someone else going through the same thing I'm going through at the highest level. Yeah.
And Kendrick, I had a question about, you work with Extreme Heights, is that your club? And so my background, I covered some track and stuff back in the day. I knew lots of the kids from Extreme Heights, and then lots of the ones, I believe, at Aim High and Mechanicsville. That's kind of the two primary pockets of even Central Virginia, Northern Virginia even will come down to Mechanicsville or Goochland to go train. With the coach there, he's this guy named Val, I think Osapenko. He's this he was a Ukrainian gymnast and pole vaulter, I think 40, 50 years, maybe 40 some years ago. Yeah. And he's kind of the mastermind behind that program now. Can you kind of shed some light on what makes that program kind of tick, and what you see when you're there and you're practicing, and maybe how that coach, because you have your coach here and your coach there, right? How he impacts, all the success that we've seen for seemingly so long now, for the last 10, 20 years in Henrico and the kind of Richmond area.
I know he's definitely good. I think he said he jumped 18 feet in his kind of pole vault thing. So that was
serious.
That's good. So so I take a lot of advice from him. I also take a lot of advice from Coach Lear with running, because running is very important.
Exactly.
So on the ground it's Coach Lear, and in the air it's more of that.
It's cool how those things come together too. I watched a lot of triple jumpers, right? And a lot of them, you're thinking oh, it's a technique, and all that stuff is so important, but they also have to be max speed by the time they hit that board, right? So all these things kind of come together, and obviously those are things that you can kind of help him maximize those techniques and skills he's taken from the physical vaulting part of it, and help him get to the finish line once these meets and stuff come up. So that's got to be a cool kind of dynamic to be able to take over in those situations.
I think sprints is a part of every race.
Yeah.
Whether it's the 100 meter, 1600, pole vaulting, long jump, even to high jump, and in some instances, even with rows.
Yeah.
I think that's just the foundation, and everything else just builds around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in I feel like when I watch the NFL draft and NBA draft, they talk about the guys that did track, right?
All
and
the time.
it's
Well,
that
the
stuff
40,
matters so
yeah.
much. You know, it's not just about speed, but it's about the way you move too, and the way you can get there and get to that max speed and utilize it in whatever niche you are. You know, so for you, it's about hitting that max speed and vaulting off the ground. For others, it's about getting to a finish line. So I always find that dynamic really interesting.
Well, the combine's all about, like, that's the most celebrated thing in the combine is the 40, right? What was his 40? 4.2 40. Oh, man, he's got, you know, they talk about that.
Especially in the skill positions.
Yeah.
You rarely hear someone get drafted and they talk about their baseball experience or tennis experience. They're always going to bring up track and field. So that's why I love the sport. Yeah. Because it can help with all sports, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
How's your transition been this year as head coach? Been part of the program for so long. I mean, you basically bleed black and gold.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, Lamont Folsom goes to your rival to become the activities director at Verina. I remember at one point he had a Verina and a Highland Springs hat on at the same time.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know you learned a lot from him. He's probably learned a lot from you too, but what's it been like being the head man?
It's been awesome. It's been an awesome experience. It was kind of like a passing the torch type of moment because when me and Coach Folsom ran track together in Highland Springs, we became All-Americans together in track and field. He was mainly the reason why I even did track and field back in the day. And on our relay team, he was the second leg and I was the third leg.
Okay.
So for him to have the head coaching job and then pass it to me, it's kind of like a surreal thing.
Yeah.
Literally passing it to
Literally passing the torch. To me, it's been an awesome experience. Of course, you can have some challenges with change. But the kids, they know how much I'm passionate about the sport and they know how much passion about their growth and experience too. So I'm excited. I mean, we have a lot of young guys. So we are graduating 7 seniors, I do believe. But when you have someone like Kendric and the rest of the crew coming back, you know, it puts a smile on your face.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be kind of a nice feeling as a coach when you've got there's so much micromanaging that goes on with your sprinters, your long distance, your relay people. And then there's Kendrick kind of doing his own thing off in the corner. And you're like, I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you have structure and you're very organized, it becomes very simple. But that's why I always encourage the kids to always have a plan because I'm always going to have one. Because otherwise it's going to be chaos. You know, if I come to practice and, you know what, I'm just going to figure out as the day goes, we're not going to be that good.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So, you know, it's all about just having structure and standard. And, again, when you wear black and gold, it has to mean something. You know, you hear it all the time around the school that it's different at the Springs, and I truly mean that.
That's a sign off on all of Harry's emails.
It's different at the Springs. It is.
Kendrick, I wanted to ask you too. Speaking of Highland Springs and Verina, I believe your brother is also a pole vaulter, right? Is he at Verina?
Yes, he goes to Verina.
I saw that on Milestat. I didn't know if that was a specialty center, if one of y'all does that or anything, like what the divide is there. But that's got to be kind of an interesting thing that now, you know, he's going to be at these meets too, and y'all are competing against each other wearing rival school colors. That's got to be like, you know, feels like you and Lamont almost at that point, right? So that's got to be a pretty interesting dynamic. Did he get into it around the same time as you, or how did that kind of work?
I know that he did it about the same age as I did. Maybe not exactly the same time.
So maybe a couple years after,
So he's 2 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
Ish. So.
And I wanted to ask you too, what is, you know, because you have this very specific role on the team, obviously, you're going to be adding in sprints. I know I've seen your Milestat, you know, you add it in every once in a while. It sounds like you're going to have a bigger role with that even next year. But on your average meet day, on one of these big your state meets coming up, right? What is your day like as far as managing? One, you know, you're kind of gearing up for your thing, right? You got to be ready and prepared for your specific jumps, but also the team dynamic, right? Being there for Highland Springs, right? What is that day like for you in managing those two sides of, you know, that important day?
It really just depends. Like recently, some of my meets have been really early in the morning, which is a little frustrating. But so even if it's not, I'll just do my own warm up, just go out and jump, and then if it's afterwards, if they're running, I'll just go support. Even if I don't know very many people, I still support who I can and try and do that. If it's like an afternoon thing, I'll say hello before I jump and do all this stuff. Like, for example, in Virginia Beach, I remember I was there. I think I came over afterwards, and I think I just jumped 15.6 and a half. So it was right after I broke the record. So I said hello to everyone, So
Hey, everybody, I just broke a record. Good to see ya.
Got just some
I
points.
got another jump coming, but
And so I don't know what date. What date is y'all's state meet?
Next Friday and Saturday. So
Next
May the
Friday.
31st and June the 1st.
And yours will be probably Saturday. Is that right?
Yeah,
His will be
Saturday,
June the
June
1st.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Early in the morning, as he said.
yeah.
obviously the team goals are to win it, but PRs too. Kendrick, do you have a number in mind for state?
For states, yes and no. Like I know I have the main one for me is 16.8 3/4 because that'll be the qualifying jump for the U20 championship in Eugene.
Fantastic. Well, you're not only soaring in pole vault and obviously going even higher with flying in a Cessna, but it seems like this is a common occurrence every time we do the Sportswire Spotlight. Every student athlete, we find out their grades are really high too, and your grades have soared to record heights as well. Tell me a little bit about the academic side, because taking care of the extracurriculars, the track and field, the learning how to fly a plane, doing the dangerous stuff. The rest of us are like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
But also maintaining your work in the classroom. You've had some pretty cool accolades with that.
Yeah, well, school's always been very, very important to me ever since I was very little. So I've always made sure to make sure that school is very, very important on my list. So
Your parents get worried about you pole vaulting and flying a plane?
not really.
No, not at all.
I was gonna ask, did they do any of that stuff, or is this just like
I know my
they're just
dad
like, I'm
did
cool with
track for sure.
it? He did track,
Yeah.
okay. But like they weren't flying planes around or anything like that. It's like
Have you ever-
that's such a
Yeah.
interesting thing to just pick up. I mean, it's outstanding. It's just like I rack my brain like, how do you just find that first thing? You know?
I just keep thinking to myself, like maybe you, as a side hobby, you could do like kind of become like a stunt man and like run,
That would be
hit
sick.
over 16 feet, grab onto the bottom of a Cessna flying really low, enter the Cessna and land.
That's like Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I mean it'd be like a Mission Impossible type
Yeah.
thing.
Do you think your brother looks up to you?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I know definitely
I
when
can
I
tell.
coach him for sure. He definitely like does really well when I encourage him for sure. Like this past Monday, he was doing. I think when he got to about 13, he started panicking. So I came over there, helped him a bunch, and he almost broke his PR. So,
Wow.
So you're a
very well.
comforting force in that situation. 'Cause we've
Wait.
seen it and done it. Yeah.
Well, he doesn't realize it, even though, I mean, we all know where he's at. You know, we can see the record, the numbers and stuff. But your presence, when you come around, it's like a massive impact on the team. It's like when you walk around, it's almost, I don't know, like The Rock just walking in the building. Like the kids, they might not say it all the time, but they rave about your talent and just how great you are. And sometimes I think you just have to be reminded of that. Like even though you're not around as much, which is totally fine, but everybody on this team knows when Kendrick's in the building, it's time to watch. So you have that presence. I just wanted to let you know that.
Time to watch and time to work as well.
Exactly.
It's like time to win.
So you said, Coach, next for you said you only graduated 7 seniors. So
7
what's next
seniors.
year's team looking like?
Next year's team, I mean, we got a lot of young kids. I think a great summer because last year was the first year we implemented like a summer program or summer all-season program for like the first time in years. I think just with that cohesive group, and then we spent a lot of time this year focusing on what they did really well versus what they didn't do well.
Yep.
So trying to shift that mindset into more positive thinking, because if somebody asks you, prime example, like if I'm at a track meet and I didn't PR, if you ask me how I did, 9 out of 10 some people's like, I could have did better, I could have had a better start. People always focus on the negative. But this year we just focused on, okay, what did you do well? Okay, well, I warmed up real good. I showed up. I gave it my all. Let's start focusing on more of the positive things. So now when we go back and look, okay, cool, this is what I did well. And then let's change the verbiage to what can I improve on.
Yeah.
So we did a whole mental shift this year, and
Sure.
I'm excited about next year.
Awesome. And for all you kids out there going to Highland Springs, there is a symbiotic relationship between track and field and football. So you want to be a next great wide receiver, you might be able to show out on the track. Am I right?
That is absolutely right. And I coach football, so I'm going to see you year
There it
round.
is.
I was about to say you're the man for that job. So.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for being part of the Sportswire Spotlight. I want to wish you best of luck, both you guys, in states. And maybe by over the summer, you can maybe teach one of us to fly or
I was about to
co-pilot a
say,
Cessna.
We'll come.
That's possible.
I'm
Maybe
actually
not.
looking for a plane ticket to Cancun. So
There you go. What's the longest you've flown? Have you flown to
Can a
Cancun
Cessna
before?
go? No, you'd
I
have
don't
to stop
think
and
so.
refuel
yeah, what's the
a few
furthest you
times.
flown?
Furthest I've flown is just for right now is out to Farmville, so just very light.
I got you.
But I know those Cessnas, I think they have a range of like 700 miles, so you can go with that.
yeah.
So you can
It's
go
probably
a
just
lot.
gas at that point,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I mean, it's still flying at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I appreciate you being part of the Sportswire Spotlight. Again, best of luck for not just nationals. So you might be at
Yeah.
nationals, but
That's it.
best of luck at states, and have a great summer. And
Thank you. You guys do the
You
same.
chill.
you
Yeah,
got
thank
it.
you guys.
So, Dylan, it's going to be interesting with Kendric as a junior, what his numbers are going to look like next season. But also, it's going to be interesting because we see this a lot in sports. Sometimes the younger brother ends up taking over.
I was going to ask him if he thought he was better than, or his brother was going to be better than him. I don't think you have a good, you're never going to know yet, but it's definitely something to think about in a couple of years. I mean, we've seen the girls at Glen Allen, what is that,
The
Sam and Emily Romano,
sisters, yeah.
that stuff follows in the family, and there's some baller pole vaulters out there. So it would not shock me at all if we hear more of Xavier's name here in a couple of years.
Amazing young man, obviously part of the center here for engineering, wants
Yeah.
to be aeronautical engineer. So.
And I was going to say, I think we've hosted, or the Equity, Diversity, and Opportunity Department's hosted a couple of those like airport career day things. The CEO of the Richmond Airport Commission, I believe, whatever the company's called, is from Varina. So like, there's lots of like good opportunities here right around for that. So hopefully we're seeing him as a pilot one day, in several years, whatever he ends up doing, or, he's the engineer, the next Boeing or whatever. So I'm really, really excited for his future.
I love the, again, and this happens every time, not to be a broken record, but I love the coach, student athlete relationship there. Larry kind of took over for a second, was like, you do realize that all of your, teammates look up to you when you walk. You need to realize that, right?
Yeah.
So that was a pretty cool moment.
Leading by example, that stuff does matter a lot in that context. So especially with track, when everyone's doing their own thing, right?
Yep.
What's the connecting thing? The way you present yourself, the way you work as a teammate.
Yep. And speaking of track, he did win the at 16 feet with a vault of 16 feet in regionals for 6A. We both were on hand to see some of the results from 5C at Hermitage on that rainy, foggy afternoon.
It was not a great day for track,
Yeah.
but they got it done regardless.
Absolutely. Mariah from J.R. Tucker, who
Last
was
guest.
our last guest on the show, she performed well. She won the 400, finished second in the 200. Uriah Harris for Hermitage. My gosh, I don't know what kind of throwing programs they have over there, but that guy threw like 168 feet. He threw a discus that far.
At first, I'm like, is it actually feet? Because I'm like 100, and then it's like, hey,
Right.
that is feet. I'm like, man. And then he won the shot put, and then there's, I think, 2 or 3 others scored in those events too.
Yep.
And then we talked about, I saw 2 of their 400 runners, I think were 3rd and 4th, so, something around there. They both had like outstanding days, and that culminated with the 4x4 that they won. Took home a region title on their home track.
Yeah,
Which,
Jonathan Logan had a big day.
Awesome.
But your home track, you get to win the regional championship. And it was really close between all those teams. But
yeah, it's usually when you see scores that low, right? I think they finished with like 67 points. When you see scores in the 50s and 60s winning a meet, that means it's anyone's ball game basically at any time, because, we mentioned the discus and thrower. Like, he got 20 of them,
yeah,
of the 57, 67. So those small, we're talking to Kendrick, right?
Yep.
He wins one event, and they have a couple more guys that can score around at Highland Springs or wherever these schools are. That can be enough for a region title in
Sure.
the right context, right?
Sure.
Having one superstar and some people that can do their jobs, play their roles, that can get the job done on the right day.
Yep, and so states are coming up for that, and 'tis the season. That we were talking earlier. There are 3 constants to late spring. There's graduations, there's regional and state playoffs, and there's weather. And so,
Seen a lot of that.
yeah. I mean, it's supposed to hold off tonight. The plans to get some action down at Cosby High School, because 6A's at Cosby. There just happens to be Glen Allen and Deep Run both playing them. And then, we're divided into 4, 5, and 6 this year, which seemed crazy in the fall. It's even crazier in the spring with all the sports happening. But
Spring, like into the season, just becomes so hectic. Even back at the Times Dispatch time, like I didn't have to do a lot of football because we had so many people doing football and basketball and stuff. But then by the end of the spring, there's Godwin, Highland Springs, Verina, all these schools are scattered everywhere.
Right.
And like they're kind of all in like the same spots, but there's like 4 different teams playing at one time. So
Right. And
I know for you that probably goes
well,
complicated.
and you get to see these teams that you hadn't seen all year, and you're
Exactly.
like, and you find out right away where you measure up. Just a couple of quick teams to keep an eye on. We did a preview on Deep Run girls soccer. And Coach Chapman said, well, we're talented, but we're really young. And they lost their first game of the year 6-1 to First Colonial. Highlights of their last regular season game against Glen Ellen are in the latest Sportswire. They hadn't lost since, and then they won their regional opener. So their season continues. Obviously First Colonial is a heck of an opponent. But Deep Run's girls soccer team continues. Freeman, girls tennis, another regional title, going for yet another state championship.
Outstanding.
Yeah, look out for them. Freeman girls lacrosse, looking for another state championship themselves. And they graduated 3 of their top players from a year ago. So it's pretty impressive kind of watching some of these teams from the beginning of the year and then see them kind of take shape, take form into what they're going to be later on. And they've had a couple of scores stand out on that. And that's just on the girls' side. We could go on for like 20 more minutes. We just don't have the time. But baseball will sort itself out. There's a lot of great teams from the 757 and then even into the Chesterfield area and into western parts of Virginia.
I was going to ask, is the Freeman Godwin, is that looking like that's going to be a collision course here soon?
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting because in 5C, there's so many teams that night in, night out can beat everybody.
Yeah.
And they could also lose to anybody.
Yeah, it's baseball.
And the pitching in the 804 area is fantastic, especially in Henrico. And there's a couple of teams south of the river that have great lineups that hit the heck out of the baseball. So it's kind of like strength against strength. I mean, they have great pitching too, but it's just like it's really dynamic in Henrico County. So we'll see how baseball works out. Cosby is tremendous in baseball and softball, so they'll have something to say both, in Region 6 and James Rivers is another dynamic team as well. But we'll see.
Yeah.
You start to all you got to do in regionals is get to that. They say the championship game is the most important one. Just get to the championship game because that automatically means you're in states.
Yeah.
It just means
Get
if you
there.
don't win the championship game, you have to travel.
The region semifinal is about as high stakes as it gets.
That's
which is
it. That's
crazy.
it. Some of the craziest games